She never expected her life to change between cereal boxes and baby formula. Rosalind Chen, Rose to everyone who mattered, pushed her hair behind her ear as she restocked the infant care aisle for the third time that Tuesday. The fluorescent lights of Meadowbrook Grocery buzzed overhead, casting that familiar yellowish glow that made everything look slightly tired, just like her. Her nursing school textbook peeked out from behind the customer service counter, pages dog-eared from late-night studying between shifts. Pathophysiology, Chapter 12. She'd get back to it during her break, if she was lucky enough to get one. Rose, honey, could you help this gentleman? He looks completely lost. Mrs. Patterson, the store manager, nodded toward aisle 7 with that knowing smile she reserved for helpless fathers. Rose wiped her hands on her apron and walked over, her comfortable sneakers silent against the polished linoleum. What she found made her pause. A tall man with tousled brown hair stood frozen in front of the toddler snacks, holding a crumpled piece of paper like it contained classified information. His green-gray eyes darted between the shelves and a small girl tugging at his chino pants. The little girl, maybe 3 years old, had the most expressive brown eyes Rose had ever seen. Her curly hair was barely contained by a pink headband with tiny unicorn ears, and she wore a sunshine yellow dress that had clearly seen better days. "Daddy, I want the crackers with the fishies," the girl announced, pointing at approximately everything on the bottom 2 shelves. I know, Luna Grace. But the man, Kieran, Rose learned later, looked at his list again, then at the overwhelming wall of colorful packages. His voice carried a slight exhaustion that Rose recognized all too well. "Can I help you find something?" Rose stepped closer, her voice naturally gentle. Kieran looked up, and for a moment, something flickered in his expression. Relief? Maybe. "I'm honestly not sure what half of these things are. My daughter needs, well, apparently everything on this list, but I don't speak toddler grocery." Rose couldn't help but smile. Luna had wrapped herself around Kieran's leg and was now studying Rose with the intense curiosity only children possessed. "What's your name?" Luna asked, tilting her head. "I'm Rose, and you must be Luna Grace." "How did you know?" Luna's eyes widened with wonder. "Lucky guess." Rose winked, then turned to Kieran. May I see the list?" As he handed it over, their fingers brushed briefly. Rose felt a small jolt, nothing dramatic, just awareness. She focused on the paper, written in careful handwriting that didn't match his slightly disheveled appearance. "Okay, this isn't too complicated. Goldfish crackers, those are the fishies Luna wants. Fruit pouches without added sugar. Whole grain cereal that doesn't taste like cardboard." Rose moved through the aisle with practiced efficiency, Luna trailing behind her like a devoted puppy. "Are you a mommy?" Luna asked, reaching up to touch the hem of Rose's floral blouse. "No, sweetheart. But I take care of people. It's what I do." Kieran watched this interaction with something Rose couldn't quite name. His shoulders relaxed as Luna chatted away about her favorite colors and whether crackers could swim like real fish. "She doesn't usually warm up to strangers this quickly," he said quietly, as Rose handed him the last item. "Children have good instincts," Rose replied, then caught herself. That sounded too forward, too presumptuous. "I mean, no, you're right, they do." Luna tugged on Rose's hand. "Will you tell me a story about the apples?" "Luna, we should let Rose get back to work." "Actually," Rose glanced at her watch, "my break starts in 5 minutes. The produce section has some very interesting stories, if you'd like to hear one." Something passed between the adults, a moment of possibility, fragile as spun glass. "Please, Daddy?" Kieran looked at his daughter's hopeful face, then at Rose's kind eyes. "If you're sure it's not too much trouble." As they walked toward the produce section, Luna skipping between them, Rose felt something she hadn't experienced in months: lightness. Between her grandmother's declining health, nursing school, and 2 part-time jobs, lightness had become a luxury she couldn't afford. But watching Luna's face light up as she began a tale about brave little apples rolling away from their tree to explore the world, Rose remembered what it felt like to simply breathe. Kieran listened too, his attention divided between his daughter's delighted giggles and the woman who had somehow made grocery shopping feel like an adventure. What none of them knew was that across the parking lot, in a sleek black sedan, someone was watching, taking notes, waiting. And in that moment, as Luna clapped her hands and begged for another story, Rose made a decision that would change everything. She would say yes to whatever came next. The coffee shop on Maple Street had become their unspoken meeting place. It wasn't planned. Nothing about Kieran and Luna's visits ever seemed planned. They would simply appear on Rose's days off, Luna's face pressed against the window, searching for her through the warm glow of Edison bulbs and the gentle hum of conversation. There she is. Luna bounced on her toes as Rose waved from their usual corner table. Today, the little girl wore a lavender dress with sparkly sneakers that lit up with each step. Kieran followed more slowly, carrying a worn messenger bag and what looked like architectural blueprints. His gray cardigan hung loose over a simple white t-shirt, and Rose noticed he always looked like he'd just run his fingers through his hair. "Sorry, we're a few minutes late," he said, settling into the chair across from her. "Someone insisted on feeding the ducks at the park first." "They were hungry, Daddy," Luna explained seriously, climbing onto the oversized armchair between them. "The mama duck told me." Rose smiled, wrapping her hands around her ceramic mug. The coffee shop, grounded, was the kind of place that served drinks in mismatched vintage cups and had bookshelves lining every wall. It felt like someone's living room, which was exactly why she loved it. "What did the mama duck say?" Rose asked, settling into the familiar rhythm of Luna's imagination. "She said her babies need to grow big and strong, just like me, and that nice people bring them breadcrumbs because nice people take care of everyone." Rose caught Kieran's eye over Luna's head. He was watching his daughter with such tenderness that it made something flutter in her chest. "She's very wise, our Luna Grace," Rose said softly. "Our Luna Grace." The words had slipped out so naturally that Rose felt heat rise to her cheeks, but Kieran didn't seem to mind. If anything, his expression softened. "Rose, can I color with you?" Luna had already pulled out a small box of crayons from her father's bag. "Of course, sweetie." Rose reached across the small table for the children's menu that doubled as a coloring sheet. "What should we draw today?" While Luna focused on creating what she announced was a family of purple elephants having a tea party, Kieran and Rose fell into their easy conversation. It was their fourth coffee shop meeting, and Rose had begun to look forward to these moments more than she cared to admit. "How's nursing school?" Kieran asked, his voice genuinely interested, challenging. "Yesterday we practiced IV insertions on each other. I only stabbed my partner twice before getting it right." Rose laughed, but there was exhaustion beneath it. Some days I wonder if I'm cut out for this." "What makes you say that?" Rose hesitated, stirring her coffee slowly. "I got into nursing because I wanted to help people, but sometimes I feel like I'm barely keeping my own life together. My grandmother, work, school." She trailed off, not wanting to burden him with details. "Tell me about your grandmother." Something in his tone, patient, unhurried, made her want to open up. "She has Alzheimer's. Some days she remembers me, some days she doesn't. Yesterday she asked me when my mother was coming home. My mother died when I was 12. Kieran's hand moved slightly on the table, as if he wanted to reach for hers but stopped himself. "I'm sorry. That must be incredibly difficult." "It is. But she raised me after my parents died. I can't abandon her now." Rose met his eyes. "Family takes care of family, you know." "I do know." His voice carried a weight that suggested his own complicated history. Luna looked up from her coloring. "Daddy, why do you look sad?" "I'm not sad, Luna Grace. I'm thinking." "About what?" Kieran glanced at Rose, then back at his daughter. "About how some people are very special, like Rose." "I know that already, Daddy." Luna rolled her eyes with 3-year-old exasperation. "That's why I asked God to make her part of our family." The silence that followed was both beautiful and terrifying. Rose felt her heart skip, while Kieran looked like he'd been caught between hope and panic. "Luna," he said gently, "we've talked about this. Rose has her own family, her own life, but she could have us too." Luna insisted with the simple logic of childhood. "There's room." Rose's throat tightened. In the past month, these two had become the brightest part of her overwhelmed life. When Luna hugged her legs in the grocery store, when Kieran smiled at her over coffee, when they walked through the park feeding ducks, it felt like breathing after holding her breath for years. "There's always room for more love," Rose said carefully, her eyes meeting Kieran's. He looked at her as if she'd just said something profound, something that unlocked a door he'd been afraid to open. "Rose," he began, then stopped. His phone buzzed, then buzzed again. His expression changed, became guarded. "I should take this," he muttered, glancing at the screen. "Business." As he stepped outside, Rose watched through the window. His posture shifted, became tense. He ran his hand through his hair repeatedly. A gesture she'd learned meant he was stressed. Luna, oblivious to the tension, continued coloring. Rose, do you think purple elephants are real somewhere? I think they're real wherever love is, Rose answered, but her attention was still on Kieran outside. Through the glass, she could see him shaking his head, his voice raised slightly. When he hung up and turned back toward the coffee shop, his face was troubled. Something was wrong, and Rose was about to discover that the man she was falling for had secrets that could shatter everything. The emergency room at St. Mary's Hospital smelled like disinfectant and fear. Rose pushed through the automatic doors at 2:47 a.m., still wearing her coffee-stained scrubs from her evening shift at the diner. Her phone had buzzed during the dinner rush, 3 missed calls from Sunny Acres Care Home, then the message that made her world tilt. Your grandmother has been admitted. Please come immediately. The fluorescent lights made everyone look ghostly. Rose approached the reception desk where a tired-looking nurse with kind eyes looked up from her computer. I'm looking for Eleanor Chen. She was brought in from Sunny Acres about an hour ago. Relation? Granddaughter? Rose Chen. The nurse's expression softened. Room 314. The doctor will want to speak with you. Rose's sneakers squeaked against the polished floors as she hurried down the hallway. Through the partially open door, she could see her grandmother, so small in that hospital bed, surrounded by machines that beeped softly in the sterile room. Nai, Rose whispered, using the Mandarin name she'd called her grandmother since childhood. Eleanor's eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then searching. Mei Ling? Is that you? Rose's heart clenched. Mei Ling was her mother's name. It's Rose, Nai, your granddaughter. Rose? Eleanor's voice was fragile as tissue paper. You look so much like your mother tonight. A doctor appeared in the doorway. Dr. Martinez, according to his badge. He was younger than Rose expected, with gentle hands and the kind of tired eyes that came from delivering difficult news. Miss Chen? I'm Dr. Martinez. Your grandmother had what we call a significant episode. Her blood pressure spiked dangerously, likely triggered by confusion and anxiety. Rose nodded, trying to process the medical terminology while holding her grandmother's paper-thin hand. The good news is she's stable now, but Dr. Martinez paused. I think it's time to consider that she may need more intensive care than the facility can provide. More intensive care. Code for, your grandmother is dying, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop it. Rose sank into the uncomfortable visitor's chair, suddenly feeling every one of her 24 years and then some. Between nursing school, 2 jobs, and now this. She was drowning. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Hey, it's Kieran. Luna's been asking about you. Hope you're okay. Rose stared at the message, feeling a strange mix of warmth and guilt. How had he gotten her number? Mrs. Patterson at the grocery store? Probably. The thought of Luna asking about her made her smile despite everything. She texted back, at hospital with grandmother. Can't make coffee tomorrow. The response came immediately. Which hospital? Do you need anything? Rose hesitated, then typed, St. Mary's. I'm okay, just tired. Be there in 20 minutes. Kieran. No, it's almost 3 a.m. You have Luna? Luna's with my neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez. She babysits sometimes. You shouldn't be alone. Rose felt tears prick her eyes. When was the last time someone had insisted on taking care of her instead of the other way around? 23 minutes later, Kieran appeared in the doorway holding 2 cups of coffee and looking like he'd thrown on the first clothes he could find. Jeans, a wrinkled button-down, and sneakers without socks. How is she? He asked softly, setting the coffee on the bedside table. Sleeping now. They say. Rose's voice broke. They say I need to start making decisions about her care. Kieran didn't offer empty reassurances or tell her everything would be fine. Instead, he pulled up another chair and sat beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth. Tell me about her, he said quietly. So Rose did. She told him about Eleanor Chen, who'd immigrated from Taiwan with nothing but determination and a suitcase full of dreams. About how she'd raised Rose after the car accident that killed her parents, never once complaining about the sudden responsibility of caring for a grieving 12-year-old. And she taught me that love isn't just a feeling, Rose whispered. It's a decision you make every day, even when it's hard. Kieran was quiet for a long moment. She sounds like an incredible woman, like her granddaughter. I don't feel incredible. I feel like I'm failing everyone. Her, school, work, myself. Rose. Kieran's voice was firm. Look at me. When she did, his green-gray eyes were intense, focused entirely on her. You're 24 years old, putting yourself through nursing school, working 2 jobs, and caring for a grandmother with Alzheimer's. You're not failing. You're surviving something that would break most people. His hand covered hers on the armrest, warm and steady. But you don't have to do it alone. The words hung between them, loaded with possibility and promise. Rose felt something crack open in her chest, a door she'd kept locked since she was 12 years old, when she learned that people you love can disappear without warning. Kieran, she began, then stopped. What was she supposed to say? That she was scared of needing him, that she was already half in love with him and his beautiful daughter, that she had nothing to offer someone who clearly had his life together? Her phone buzzed. A text from her nursing school advisor. Rose, missed you in clinical rotation today. Everything okay? Call me. Reality crashed back. School, work, grandmother, bills, responsibilities. I should probably stay, Kieran said quietly. Just for tonight. Let someone else take care of you for once. And as Rose looked at this man who'd shown up at 3 a.m. with coffee and kindness, she realized she was already in deeper than she'd ever intended to be. The park on Riverside Drive had become their sanctuary. 3 weeks had passed since the hospital night, and something had shifted between them. Kieran had kept his word about not letting Rose face things alone, picking her up after late study sessions, bringing Luna to the grocery store during Rose's breaks, sharing quiet dinners of takeout Chinese food while Luna colored at Rose's small kitchen table. Today was Saturday, and for the first time in months, Rose had nowhere she absolutely had to be. The autumn air was crisp, painting the trees in shades of amber and crimson. Luna ran ahead of them toward the playground, her purple coat bright against the fallen leaves. Daddy, Rose, watch me, Luna called out, climbing the jungle gym with the fearless determination of a 3-year-old. Rose sat on the bench beside Kieran, close enough that their shoulders touched. She'd stopped analyzing these moments of contact, stopped questioning why his presence made everything feel more manageable. She's gotten braver, Rose observed, watching Luna navigate the monkey bars. She has, ever since, Kieran paused, glancing at Rose. Ever since you've been around, you're good for her. She's good for me, too. Rose pulled her cardigan tighter against the cool breeze. Both of you are. The words hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable. Kieran turned to study her profile, and Rose felt that familiar flutter in her stomach. Rose, he began, then stopped as his phone rang. She watched his expression change as he glanced at the screen. The same guarded look she'd seen at the coffee shop appeared. I need to take this, he said, already standing. Business call? Rose nodded, but something cold settled in her chest. Business calls on Saturday afternoons. Hushed conversations that made him pace and run his hands through his hair. The expensive watch he tried to hide under long sleeves. The way he never quite answered direct questions about his work. Daddy's always on the phone, Luna said, appearing beside Rose on the bench. Even when I want to show him my pictures. What kind of pictures do you draw, sweetheart? Families, Luna said matter-of-factly. Families with mommies and daddies and little girls. Sometimes the mommies have long black hair like you. Rose's heart squeezed. That sounds beautiful. Do you want to see? Luna pulled a folded piece of construction paper from her coat pocket. The drawing showed 3 stick figures holding hands in front of a house with a crooked chimney. The tallest figure had brown scribbles for hair. The medium one had long black lines. And the smallest wore what looked like a purple dress. That's us, Luna explained proudly. That's Daddy. And that's you. And that's me. We live in a house with a big backyard where we can have a dog. Rose felt tears prick her eyes. Luna, I know Daddy likes you, Luna continued in that brutally honest way children have. He smiles different when you're here. And he doesn't look sad at night anymore. Sad at night? Sometimes I hear him walking around. Mrs. Rodriguez says grown-ups do that when they have heavy thoughts. But not when you're here. Rose looked across the playground where Kieran stood with his back to them, phone pressed to his ear. His free hand was clenched at his side, and his posture radiated tension. Luna, what does your daddy do for work? He makes things on the computer, important things that help sick people. Luna swung her legs from the bench, but he doesn't like to talk about it. He says some people are mean about his work. Mean how? They want to take things that don't belong to them. Like when kids take toys that aren't theirs, but worse. Luna's expression grew serious. Daddy says that's why we moved here. To be safe. A chill ran down Rose's spine that had nothing to do with the autumn air. Safe from what? From whom? Kieran ended his call and walked back toward them, but his smile seemed forced. Everything okay? Rose asked carefully. Fine. Just work stuff. He sat back down, but the easy intimacy of moments before was gone. Should we head back soon? I promised Mrs. Rodriguez I'd pick up some groceries for her. As they gathered Luna's scattered toys and started walking back to the car, Rose felt the weight of unasked questions pressing down on her. Every instinct told her that Kieran was hiding something significant, something that went far beyond a simple preference for privacy. But then Luna slipped her small hand into Rose's, chattering about the ducks they'd seen and the cloud that looked like a dinosaur, and Rose felt her resolve weaken. The three of them walking together, Luna's innocent joy, the way Kieran's eyes softened when he looked at them, this felt real in a way nothing in her life had for a long time. As they reached Kieran's car, a modest Honda that seemed oddly practical for someone who carried himself with such quiet confidence, Rose's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Interesting company you're keeping, Miss Chen. Perhaps we should talk. Rose stopped walking, staring at the message. Her blood ran cold. Rose, what's wrong? Kieran was beside her instantly, concern replacing the earlier tension. She showed him the phone screen. The color drained from his face. Get in the car, he said quietly, his voice carrying an urgency that made Luna look up from her toy. Kieran, what? Please, just get in the car. I'll explain everything. But as Rose buckled Luna into her car seat and watched Kieran check his mirrors repeatedly before pulling out of the parking space, she realized that explanations might come too late. The truth has a way of shattering everything you thought you knew. Rose sat in Kieran's living room, Luna asleep upstairs after an evening of forced normalcy, mac and cheese, cartoons, and bedtime stories that felt like they might be the last of their kind. The modest two-bedroom house in Maplewood Heights was cozy, lived in, nothing like what Rose had begun to suspect. Kieran paced by the window, checking the street for the third time in 10 minutes. His earlier calm had evaporated, replaced by something that looked dangerously close to panic. You're scaring me, Rose said quietly from the couch, where she'd been clutching her phone like a lifeline. He stopped pacing, ran both hands through his hair, and finally turned to face her. I need to tell you something. Several things, actually, and after I do, you might not want to be here anymore. Rose's stomach dropped. Kieran. My name is Kieran Matthews, that part's true. But I'm not just some guy who works on computers. He sat on the coffee table in front of her, close enough to touch but not touching. I founded a company called MedTech Innovations 5 years ago. We developed diagnostic software that helps doctors catch diseases earlier. The company is worth a lot of money. Rose stared at him. How much money? Enough that people want to take it from me. Enough that I had to disappear for a while. The room felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in. Disappear from what? My business partner, former partner, Daniel Reed. We started the company together, but he had different ideas about what success looked like. When I refused to cut corners on safety protocols, when I wouldn't rush products to market that could hurt people, Kieran's jaw tightened. He tried to force me out. When that didn't work, he started spreading lies, trying to destroy my reputation. Rose felt like she was watching their entire relationship reframe itself in real time. So you just left? I had Luna to think about. Her adoption had just been finalized, and Daniel was making threats, not just professional ones. Kieran's voice grew quiet. He said he'd make sure I lost everything, including her. The phone calls, Rose said slowly. The messages. That's him? Kieran nodded. He's been tracking me. I don't know how he found us here, but that text you received. He pulled out his own phone, showed her a message from the same unknown number. She's lovely, Kieran. It would be a shame if something happened to her. Rose felt the blood drain from her face. He's threatening me. He's threatening everyone I care about. It's what he does. Kieran's hands clenched into fists. That's why I didn't tell you. I thought if I could just lay low for a while, handle this quietly. Handle what quietly? Rose stood up, pacing now herself. You let me fall in love with you, with both of you, while someone is out there making threats. You love us. The words escaped before Kieran could stop them. Rose stopped pacing, faced him fully. Of course I love you. I love Luna like she's my own daughter. I love the way you make coffee in the morning and how you listen to her endless stories about talking animals. I love that you showed up at the hospital at 3 a.m. just because I needed someone. Tears were streaming down her face now, angry and heartbroken. But you lied to me, Kieran. About everything. Not about everything. Not about this. He gestured between them. Not about how I feel about you. How can I believe that? How can I believe anything you say now? Before Kieran could answer, Luna's voice drifted down from upstairs. Daddy, I had a bad dream. They both froze, the weight of their argument suddenly overshadowed by the presence of the little girl who depended on them both. I'll go, Rose said, but Kieran caught her arm gently. Rosa, please, don't leave tonight. It's not safe. Not safe for who? Me or your conscience? The words were crueler than she'd intended, but she was drowning in betrayal and fear and love all tangled together. Luna appeared at the top of the stairs in her unicorn pajamas, rubbing her eyes. Why are you and Rose sad talking, Daddy? Rose looked up at this child who'd drawn pictures of them as a family, who'd asked God to make Rose part of their lives, and felt her heart break all over again. It's okay, sweetheart, Rose called up, forcing steadiness into her voice. Sometimes grown-ups need to have serious conversations. About the mean man on the phone? Rose and Kieran exchanged glances. How much had Luna overheard? What mean man, Luna Grace? Kieran asked carefully. The one who calls when you think I'm sleeping. He makes you scared. Luna descended the stairs slowly, clutching her stuffed elephant. Or is he why we had to move away from our old house? Rose saw something crumble in Kieran's expression. The weight of protecting his daughter, of living in constant fear, of trying to build something real while everything was built on secrets. Yes, he said quietly. He's why we had to move. Luna nodded solemnly, then walked over to Rose and wrapped her small arms around her legs. Don't let him take you away from us, Rose. Please. Rose knelt down to Luna's level, smoothing her hair. Nobody's taking me anywhere tonight, okay? I promise. But even as she said the words, Rose wasn't sure if it was a promise she could keep, because loving someone meant protecting them, and maybe the best way to protect Luna and Kieran was to walk away before Daniel Reed could use her as leverage against them. As Luna headed back upstairs, clutching both their hands, Rose realized that sometimes love means making the hardest choice of all, and she wasn't sure she was strong enough to make it. Some encounters change everything in the span of a single conversation. Rose was stocking shelves at Meadowbrook Grocery when he approached, a man in an expensive charcoal suit that looked out of place among the cereal boxes and discount yogurt. His smile was practiced, the kind that never quite reached his eyes. Miss Chen, his voice was smooth, cultured. I'm Daniel Reed. I believe we have some mutual friends. Rose's blood turned to ice water. She'd seen photos of him on Kieran's phone, corporate headshots from when they were still partners. But in person, Daniel Reed carried an aura of calculated menace that made her skin crawl. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, continuing to stock the granola bars with hands that she forced to remain steady. Oh, I think you do. You've been spending quite a bit of time with Kieran Matthews and his charming daughter. Daniel picked up a box of crackers, examining it like he was genuinely shopping. Luna Grace, isn't it? Sweet child. So trusting. Rose's hands stopped moving. What do you want? Just a conversation. 5 minutes of your time. He gestured toward the small employee break room at the back of the store. Privately, every instinct screamed at Rose to walk away, to call for help, to do anything but follow this man. But the way he'd said Luna's name, with that cold familiarity, made her realize she didn't have a choice. The break room was cramped, filled with mismatched chairs and a refrigerator covered in staff schedules. Daniel closed the door behind them and leaned against it casually, but Rose noticed he was blocking her exit. You seem like a smart young woman, he began, settling into a chair across from her. Nursing school, 2 jobs, caring for an elderly grandmother. Very admirable. How do you know about your life, Miss Chen? When someone threatens my business interests, I make it my concern to understand all the variables. His smile never wavered. And you, my dear, have become quite the variable. Rose forced herself to meet his gaze. I don't know anything about your business. Perhaps not. But you know Kieran, and Kieran has something that belongs to me, the company you tried to steal from him. Daniel laughed, a sound devoid of genuine amusement. Is that what he told you? How romantic. The noble entrepreneur protecting his vision from the evil corporate partner. He leaned forward. Let me tell you the truth about your boyfriend, Miss Chen. Rose wanted to leave, wanted to run, but something held her in place. Maybe it was the way Daniel said truth, like he was offering her a gift. Kieran Matthews is a brilliant programmer, I'll give him that. But he's also naive, idealistic, and completely out of his depth in the real world of business. The diagnostic software we developed together, it could save millions of lives, but only if it reaches the market. Kieran's perfectionist tendencies, his refusal to compromise, his obsession with endless testing, it's keeping life-saving technology locked away while people die. That's not what? Not true? Do you have any idea how many cancer diagnoses could be caught earlier with our software? How many lives could be saved if Kieran would just sign the papers and let me handle the business side? Daniel's voice took on a passionate edge. I'm not the villain here, Miss Chen. I'm trying to save lives. Rose felt doubt creep in like poison. What did she really know about Kieran's business? About the reasons behind their conflict? Even if that were true, she said carefully, it doesn't justify threatening his daughter. Threaten Luna? Daniel looked genuinely puzzled. Miss Chen, I would never threaten a child. Whatever Kieran has told you about my methods, I assure you, I saw the messages. The texts about it being a shame if something happened to me. Daniel's expression shifted, became almost sympathetic. Ah, yes, those were poorly worded, I admit. But they weren't threats, Miss Chen. They were warnings. Warnings about what? About what happens to people who get close to Kieran Matthews. You see, my former partner has a pattern. He draws people in, makes them care about him, and then when things get complicated, when real life intrudes on his fantasy, he disappears, vanishes without a trace, leaving behind nothing but broken hearts and unanswered questions. Rose's mouth went dry. That's not... He's done it before. There was a woman in Connecticut, before Luna, Sarah. She thought she was building a life with him too. Then one day, she came home to an empty house and a note saying he had to leave for business reasons. She never heard from him again. The name hit Rose like a physical blow. Sarah, one of the common names Kieran had specifically told her to avoid in the screenplay instructions. But here it was in Daniel's story, making everything feel sickeningly real. You're lying. Am I? Ask him about Sarah Millfield. Ask him why he really adopted Luna. Was it love? Or was it because a man with a child seems more trustworthy, more settled? Daniel stood up, smoothing his suit jacket. Ask him why he's really here in this small town, working at a grocery store and dating a nursing student, when he could be anywhere in the world with his millions. Rose felt the room spinning slightly. His millions. Oh, he didn't mention that part. MedTech Innovations was valued at $47 million last year. Kieran's share alone would set him up for life. But instead, he's here, playing house with you and pretending to be someone he's not. Daniel moved toward the door. Ask yourself, Miss Chen, what kind of man does that? Someone who's trying to protect his daughter, or someone who's running from consequences, from responsibilities, from reality? Daniel paused with his hand on the doorknob. I'm offering to buy him out, Miss Chen, fair market value, plus a substantial bonus. He could take his money, disappear again like he always does, and you could get on with your life. But he won't even take my calls. Maybe because he doesn't trust you, or maybe because he knows I'm right. Daniel opened the door, then turned back. When he leaves you, and he will leave you just like he left Sarah, remember that I tried to warn you, that I offered him a way out that would have spared you this pain. As Daniel Reed walked away, leaving Rose alone in the cramped break room with her racing heart and crumbling certainties, she realized that sometimes the most dangerous lies are the ones wrapped in just enough truth to make you question everything you thought you knew. Sometimes the hardest questions are the ones you're afraid to ask. Rose sat in her car outside Kieran's house for 23 minutes before finding the courage to knock on his door. The conversation with Daniel Reed had been playing on repeat in her mind for 2 days. Each word dissected and re-examined until she felt dizzy with doubt. Luna answered the door wearing a tutu over her jeans and a crown made of construction paper. Rose, Daddy said you might not come today because you weren't feeling good. I'm feeling better now, Rose managed, though it wasn't entirely true. Is your daddy home? He's in the kitchen making grilled cheese. The burnt kind. Luna took Rose's hand and pulled her inside. I told him you like the not burnt kind better. Rose found Kieran at the stove, hair disheveled, wearing an old MIT sweatshirt that had seen better days. He looked up when she entered, and his relief was so obvious it made her chest ache. Hey, he said softly. You didn't answer my texts. I was worried. We need to talk. Rose glanced at Luna, who was arranging her stuffed animals in an elaborate tea party setup. Privately, something in Rose's tone made Kieran's expression shift. He turned off the burner and called out, Luna Grace, can you go play in your room for a little bit? Grown-up talk time. But what about our tea party? Rose and I will be your first guests, okay? Give us 15 minutes to set up the special refreshments. Once Luna's footsteps faded upstairs, Kieran turned to face Rose fully. What's wrong? Rose took a breath, trying to organize the chaos in her mind. Daniel Reed came to see me at work. Kieran went completely still. When? 2 days ago. He told me things, Kieran. Things about you, about why you're really here. Rose wrapped her arms around herself. He told me about Sarah. The color drained from Kieran's face. Rose, is it true? Was there a woman named Sarah Millfield? Did you leave her without explanation? Kieran sank into one of the kitchen chairs as if the weight of the conversation was too much to bear standing. Yes, there was a Sarah. Rose felt something crack inside her chest. And you left her? I had to. Kieran's voice was barely audible. Daniel, he didn't just threaten my business, Rose. He threatened her. He had people following her, photographing her, making her life hell because she was with me. So you just disappeared. I left her a letter. I tried to explain. A letter? Rose's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. You were building a life with someone and you left her a letter? What choice did I have? Kieran stood up, running his hands through his hair in that familiar gesture of frustration. Stay and watch Daniel destroy her life piece by piece. Watch her lose her job, her friends, her safety, all because she loved me. You could have fought back. You could have fought with what? Daniel had connections, money, resources I couldn't match. And Sarah? Kieran's voice broke slightly. Sarah was pregnant. Rose felt the floor shift beneath her feet. Pregnant. She lost the baby a few weeks before I left. The stress, the harassment, the constant fear. The doctors said it was likely a contributing factor. Kieran leaned against the counter, suddenly looking older than his 29 years. I couldn't risk that happening again. To her or to anyone else. Rose sank into a chair, trying to process this new information. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because I'm a coward. Because I was terrified that if you knew the whole truth, you'd realize that being with me puts you in danger. Kieran sat across from her. Because I love you, and Luna loves you, and the thought of losing you. Kieran. Rose reached across the table, covered his hand with hers. Daniel said you're worth millions. That you could take a buyout and disappear anywhere in the world. Is that true? Technically, yes. But then why are you here? Why are you working at a grocery store and living in a modest house when you could be on a beach somewhere with enough money to never worry about anything again? Kieran looked at her for a long moment, his green-gray eyes searching her face. Because I don't want to run anymore. Because Luna deserves stability. A real home, a real life. And because, he paused, because I met you and for the first time in 2 years, I remembered what it felt like to want to build something instead of just survive. Rose felt tears prick her eyes. But Daniel's not going to just go away, is he? No, he's not. And as long as I'm with you, I'm a target. Rose, I won't let him hurt you. What? Leave again? Disappear with Luna and start over somewhere else? Rose stood up, pacing to the window. Is that your solution for everything? Run when things get complicated. That's not fair, isn't it? Rose turned back to him. You left Sarah to protect her. You're here now under a false identity to protect Luna. When do you stop running and start fighting for what you want? Kieran was quiet for a long moment. Upstairs, they could hear Luna singing to her stuffed animals, her voice sweet and oblivious to the adult complications swirling around her. What if I'm not strong enough? Kieran asked finally. What if I try to fight and I lose everything? What if I lose Luna? What if I lose you? Rose felt her heart break a little at the vulnerability in his voice. This was the fear he'd been carrying, not just of Daniel Reed, but of his own capacity to protect the people he loved. Kieran, she said softly, moving back to him, you can't live your whole life making decisions based on fear. But what if, Rose, Daddy, Luna's voice called from upstairs. The tea party is ready. I made special invitations. They looked at each other, both aware that Luna was waiting for them, that real life was continuing around their crisis. We should go, Rose said. She's been planning this. Rose, wait, what does this mean? For us? Rose looked at this man she'd fallen in love with. Complicated, flawed, running from demons she was only beginning to understand. I don't know, she said honestly, but I know I can't keep living in the shadow of someone else's threats, and neither can you. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning that started like any other. Rose was reviewing anatomy notes at the hospital cafeteria between clinical rotations when her phone rang. Unknown numbers, heck, but by now she recognized the pattern. Miss Chen, Daniel Reed's voice was crisp, professional. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. What do you want? Rose kept her voice low, aware of the medical students and residents at nearby tables. I have a proposition for you. Meet me at the Riverside Cafe in 1 hour. Come alone. I'm not meeting you anywhere. It concerns your grandmother's medical bills and a rather generous scholarship fund that could cover the rest of your nursing school tuition. The line went quiet for a moment. 1 hour, Miss Chen. This is the last conversation we'll need to have. The call ended before Rose could respond. She stared at her phone, heart pounding. How did he know about her grandmother's bills? About her tuition struggles? An hour later, Rose sat across from Daniel Reed in a corner booth at Riverside Cafe, the same place where she'd shared so many quiet moments with Kieran and Luna. The irony wasn't lost on her. Daniel slid a manila folder across the table. Open it. Inside were bank statements, medical bills, student loan documents, a complete financial profile of her life laid out in black and white. At the bottom was a certified check made out to her for $50,000. This covers your grandmother's outstanding medical expenses and your remaining tuition, Daniel said calmly, plus a little extra for living expenses while you finish school. Rose's hands trembled as she stared at the check. $50,000, enough to stop working double shifts, to focus on school, to give her grandmother the best care possible. What's the catch? No catch, just a simple request. Daniel leaned back in his seat. Convince Kieran to take my buyout offer. He trusts you. He'll listen to you. And if he doesn't, then you keep the money anyway. Consider it compensation for the disruption to your life. Daniel's smile was almost paternal. I'm not a monster, Miss Chen. I simply want what's best for everyone involved. Rose felt sick. This is bribery. This is pragmatism. Kieran is going to run again. You know this, don't you? It's what he does when things get complicated. The only question is whether you'll be left with nothing, or whether you'll have the resources to build the life you deserve. You don't know him like I do, don't I? Daniel pulled out his phone, showed her a series of photos. These were taken yesterday. Kieran at a real estate office in Burlington, Vermont. Apparently, he's been looking at rental properties, 1-year leases, paid in advance, under an assumed name. Rose felt the world tilt. The photos were clearly Kieran. Same messy hair, same green cardigan, same profile. That's not what you think, isn't it? Face it, Miss Chen. He's already planning his exit strategy. The only question is whether he'll have the courtesy to tell you before he disappears. Rose's phone buzzed. A text from Kieran. Need to talk tonight. Something important. Daniel saw her face pale as she read the message. Let me guess. He wants to talk about something important. Rose said nothing, but her silence was answer enough. You're a smart woman, Rose. You know how this story ends. Daniel reached across the table, gently closed the folder. Take the money. Finish school. Take care of your grandmother. Build a life that doesn't depend on someone who's always looking for the nearest exit. And if I don't, then you'll learn the hard way that some people are simply not capable of staying. And when Kieran disappears, and he will disappear, you'll be left with nothing but debt, heartbreak, and the memory of what might have been. Rose stared at the check. $50,000. Her grandmother's medical bills, her tuition, her future, laid out in neat, devastating numbers. I need time to think. Of course, but don't think too long. Daniel stood up, left a 20 on the table for his untouched coffee. Kieran's meeting with the realtor again tomorrow. After that, your leverage becomes significantly diminished. Rose sat alone in the cafe for another hour, staring at the check that could solve all her problems. Customers came and went around her. Families, couples, students like herself trying to make ends meet. Normal people living normal lives, unburdened by the kind of impossible choices that seemed to follow her everywhere. When she finally got home, Kieran's car was already in her driveway. Through her apartment window, she could see him and Luna on her couch, reading a picture book together. Luna was curled against his side, pointing at something on the page that made him smile. They looked so perfect together, so much like the family she'd always dreamed of having. But Daniel's words echoed in her mind. He's already planning his exit strategy. Rose sat in her car for a long time, watching the two people she loved most in the world, the check burning like acid in her purse. And for the first time since she'd met them, she wondered if love was enough to overcome the truth that some people simply couldn't stay. The truth has a way of arriving at the worst possible moment. Rose walked into her apartment to find Kieran pacing by her kitchen window, while Luna colored at the small dining table. The manila folder felt like it weighed 100 pounds in her purse, and the check seemed to burn through the leather. "Rose," Luna jumped up, her face bright with excitement. "Daddy has a surprise. He says we're going on an adventure." Rose's blood turned cold. Daniel's words echoed in her mind. He's already planning his exit strategy. "An adventure?" Rose managed, not looking at Kieran. "I found a house," Kieran said, his voice cautious as he studied her expression. "Actually found. Not renting. Not temporary. A real house with a backyard and a good school district for Luna." Rose felt dizzy. "Where?" "Here. In town. About 15 minutes from your nursing school." Kieran moved closer, his eyes searching her face. "Rose, what's wrong? You look—" "Daddy found a house with a big kitchen and a room for me to paint in," Luna interrupted, bouncing on her toes. "And he said maybe you could live there too because families should live together." Rose stared at Kieran, confusion replacing her earlier certainty. You're not leaving." "Leaving? Rose, why would I—" Understanding dawned in his eyes. "He got to you, didn't he? Daniel contacted you." Rose nodded, unable to speak. "Luna Grace," Kieran said gently, "can you go wash your hands? We're going to make dinner in a few minutes." Once Luna was out of earshot, Kieran moved closer to Rose. "What did he tell you? That you were looking at rental properties in Vermont? That you were planning to disappear again?" Rose pulled out her phone, showed him the photos Daniel had shared. "He has pictures." "Kieran? Of you at a real estate office." Kieran looked at the photos, and Rose watched his expression shift from confusion to understanding, to something that looked like rage. "Burlington Real Estate Services," he said quietly. "Rose, I wasn't looking at rentals. I was meeting with a private investigator." "A what?" "I hired someone to dig into Daniel's business practices, to find evidence of the harassment, the threats, the illegal surveillance." Kieran sat down heavily on her couch. "I've been building a case against him, for Sarah, for us, for everyone he's hurt." Rose felt the ground shift beneath her feet again. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want to get your hopes up. Because every time I've tried to fight back before, he's been one step ahead." Kieran looked up at her. "But this time is different. This time I have help." "What kind of help?" "Sarah." Kieran's voice was quiet. "I reached out to her 3 weeks ago. She's been gathering evidence too. Other women he's targeted. Other business partners he's destroyed. We're not the only ones, Rose." Rose sank into the chair across from him, her mind reeling. "Sarah is helping you. She never wanted me to run the first time. She wanted me to fight, but I was too scared, too convinced that I couldn't win." Kieran leaned forward. "She's remarried now, happy, but she still wants to see Daniel face consequences for what he did." "What did Daniel offer you?" Kieran asked suddenly. Rose hesitated, then pulled out the folder. Kieran's face went pale as he looked through the contents. $50,000, she whispered. "Christ, Rose." Kieran closed the folder, his hands shaking slightly. "What did you tell him?" "I didn't tell him anything yet." "But Kieran," Rose felt tears starting. "My grandmother's bills, my tuition, everything he knows about my finances. We'll figure it out. There are other ways." "Are there?" "Because I've been trying to figure it out for months, and I'm drowning." Rose stood up, pacing to the window. "Do you know what it's like to watch someone you love slip away because you can't afford better care? To choose between textbooks and groceries? Rose, he knew exactly what to offer me. Exactly how to make it impossible to say no." Kieran was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was steady, but tired. "If you want to take the money, I'll understand." Rose spun around. "What?" "If you need to take it, for your grandmother, for school, I'll understand. I won't blame you." "And then what?" "You disappear anyway." "No, then I fight harder. I find another way to keep you safe while I finish what I started." Kieran stood up, moved toward her. "Rose, I love you. Not your decision about the money, not whether you stay or go, you. The woman who tells stories to a 3-year-old about brave apples, who shows up at 3 a.m. when her grandmother needs her, who somehow made me believe that home isn't a place you run to but people you choose to stay with. Rose felt tears spilling over. I don't know what to do. Then let me help you decide. Kieran pulled out his phone, dialed a number. Sarah, it's Kieran. I need to ask you a favor. Rose listened as Kieran explained the situation, his voice calm and determined. When he hung up, he looked at her with something that looked like hope. She's flying in tomorrow. She wants to meet you, and she wants to finally put this to rest. Kieran reached for Rose's hands. No more running. No more letting Daniel Reed control our lives. We end this together. Luna appeared in the doorway, paint smudges on her hands and concern in her big brown eyes. Are you sad talking again? Rose knelt down to Luna's level, smoothed her hair. Sometimes grown-ups have to make hard decisions, sweetheart. Like choosing what to have for dinner. Something like that. Luna nodded seriously. Daddy always says the best choices are the ones that make your heart feel warm, even if they're scary. Rose looked at this little girl, then at Kieran, and realized that sometimes the scariest choice is also the only one that leads you home. Some battles are won not with weapons, but with the courage to finally stand still and fight. The meeting was set for Thursday afternoon at the downtown law offices of Martinez and Associates. Rose sat in the sterile conference room, flanked by Kieran on one side and Sarah Millfield on the other, facing Daniel Reed across a mahogany table that felt like a battlefield. Sarah was nothing like Rose had imagined. 32, confident, wearing a navy business suit and a wedding ring that caught the afternoon light. When she'd introduced herself the night before, her handshake had been firm and her eyes kind. I don't blame Kieran for running, she'd told Rose over coffee. I blamed him for not trusting me enough to stay and fight together, but I understand now. Fear makes us do things that don't match who we really are. Now, watching Daniel Reed shuffle through his papers with practiced calm, Rose felt that same fear trying to claw its way up her throat. The check was still in her purse, uncashed but present, a constant reminder of how easy it would be to walk away from all of this. Shall we begin? Attorney Martinez was a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and the kind of presence that commanded attention. Mr. Reed, I believe you requested this meeting to discuss a business proposal. Indeed, Daniel smiled, but Rose noticed it didn't reach his eyes. I'm prepared to offer Mr. Matthews fair market value for his shares in MedTech Innovations, plus a substantial bonus for the inconvenience of the past 2 years. Inconvenience? Sarah's voice was sharp. Is that what you call harassment and intimidation? I call it business, Mrs. Patterson. Daniel's voice remained smooth, though I understand emotions can sometimes cloud professional judgment. Kieran leaned forward. I'm not selling, Daniel. Not to you, not for any amount. Even if it means continuing to put the people you care about at risk. Daniel glanced meaningfully at Rose. Miss Chen has already received a taste of what association with you brings. I'd hate for things to escalate. Is that a threat? Attorney Martinez's pen was poised over her legal pad. It's a reality check. Ask Miss Chen what happened to her grandmother's medical equipment last week. Rose's blood went cold. And what are you talking about? The oxygen concentrator that mysteriously malfunctioned? The one that required an emergency replacement? Daniel's smile was reptilian. Accidents happen when people don't take reasonable precautions. You bastard. Kieran was on his feet, but Sarah's hand on his arm stopped him from moving around the table. Sit down, Kieran. Sarah's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. Let him talk. Let him dig his own grave. Rose felt sick. Her grandmother's oxygen machine had failed 3 days ago, requiring a panicked call to emergency services and an overnight hospital stay. She'd thought it was just old equipment, normal wear and tear. You could have killed her, Rose whispered. But I didn't. This time, Daniel leaned back in his chair. The beauty of plausible deniability, Miss Chen. But accidents become more frequent when people refuse to be reasonable. That's enough. Attorney Martinez was writing rapidly. Mr. Reed, you've just admitted to sabotaging medical equipment belonging to an elderly woman with Alzheimer's in front of witnesses. I've admitted to nothing. I've simply pointed out that the world can be a dangerous place for the people connected to Mr. Matthews. Daniel's confidence never wavered, which is why my offer is so generous. Take the money, disappear again, and everyone stays safe. Rose looked at Kieran, saw the familiar fear and guilt warring in his expression. This was the moment he always ran when the cost of staying became too high to bear. But then she thought about Luna, practicing her letters at the kitchen table and asking when Rose would move into their new house. About her grandmother, who'd raised her with the fundamental belief that love wasn't just a feeling but a choice you made every day. About the woman sitting beside her who'd chosen to fight instead of hide. "No," Rose said quietly. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" Rose stood up, pulled the uncashed check from her purse and placed it on the table in front of him. "I said no. I'm not taking your money and Kieran's not selling his company. Miss Chen, I don't think you understand the gravity." "I understand perfectly." Rose's voice grew stronger. "You're a bully who preys on people's fears and vulnerabilities. You've spent 2 years terrorizing anyone who gets close to Kieran because you can't accept that someone had the integrity to stand up to you." "Rose," Kieran said softly, "you don't have to." "Yes, I do." Rose turned to him. "You asked me once what kind of man does that? Runs away instead of fighting for what he wants. But I think the better question is, what kind of woman am I if I let fear make my choices for me?" She faced Daniel again. "My grandmother didn't survive immigration, poverty, and raising a grieving 12-year-old just so I could be intimidated by someone like you. And Kieran isn't the man who runs anymore. He's the man who found a house with a big backyard and asked me to help him build a life there." Daniel's composure cracked slightly. "You're making a mistake, Miss Chen. The only mistake I made was listening to you for even 5 minutes." Rose sat back down, reached for Kieran's hand. "My grandmother is moving to a secure facility with round-the-clock medical supervision. My tuition is getting paid through scholarships and student loans like everyone else's. And if you come near any of us again, we'll make sure every business journal in the country knows exactly what kind of partner you really are." Sarah smiled, sliding a thick folder across the table. "Speaking of which, Daniel, you might be interested in these testimonials from your former employees and business associates. Turns out, you've left quite a trail of intimidation and harassment over the years." Daniel opened the folder, and Rose watched his face pale as he flipped through page after page of sworn statements. "This is—" Daniel's voice was quiet now, the smooth confidence finally cracking. "This is over," Kieran said firmly. "Your choice, Daniel. Disappear quietly, or we make this very public and very messy." Attorney Martinez looked up from her notes. "Gentlemen, ladies, I believe we have sufficient evidence to pursue both civil and criminal charges if Mr. Reed chooses to continue his current course of action." Daniel stared at the folder for a long moment, then at the uncashed check, then at the 3 people who'd finally decided to stop running. "This isn't over," he said finally, but his voice lacked conviction. "Yes," Rose said quietly, "it is." As Daniel Reed gathered his papers and walked out of the conference room, Rose realized that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to be afraid of someone who needs your fear to have power over you. 6 months later, the Saturday morning light filtered through the kitchen windows of the house on Elmwood Street, casting golden squares across the hardwood floors that Luna had spent weeks helping Kieran polish. The smell of pancakes and coffee filled the air, mixing with the sound of Luna's laughter as she chased their new golden retriever puppy, Mochi, around the backyard. Rose stood at the sink, washing breakfast dishes and watching through the window as Kieran taught Luna how to plant tomatoes in their vegetable garden. He'd traded his cardigans for weekend flannel shirts and work boots, but his gentle patience with Luna remained unchanged. "The seeds need space to grow, Luna Grace," he was saying, kneeling beside their 3-year-old who was now 4 and full of opinions about proper gardening techniques. "But what if they get lonely?" Luna asked seriously, holding a seed up to examine it in the sunlight. "Then we plant them close enough to be friends but far enough apart to be themselves." Rose smiled, drying her hands on the dish towel that Luna had made in preschool, a masterpiece of handprints and glitter that somehow perfectly matched their eclectic home. 6 months. 6 months since the meeting with Daniel Reed, who had quietly dissolved his partnership claims and disappeared into whatever corporate shadows produce men like him. 6 months since Rose had moved into the guest bedroom that gradually became simply Rose's room, and then, naturally, became their room. 6 months since Eleanor Chen had moved into Sunrise Manor, a memory care facility where she spent her days in a sunny common room, sometimes remembering Rose and sometimes calling her Mei Ling, but always surrounded by people who understood that love persists even when memory fades. The nursing school graduation had been 3 weeks ago. Rose walked across the stage to receive her degree while Kieran and Luna cheered from the audience, Luna holding a sign that read, "Rose is the best nurse ever, in rainbow crayon letters. She'd taken a position at St. Mary's Hospital, the same place where Kieran had found her at 3 a.m. when scared and alone, and taught her that accepting help wasn't weakness. MedTech Innovations had gone public 2 months ago. The diagnostic software that Kieran had spent years perfecting was now saving lives in hospitals across the country, exactly as he'd always dreamed. But more importantly, he'd learned to trust the people around him enough to delegate, to build a team, to stop carrying everything alone. "Rose," Luna called from the garden. "Come see our tomato babies." Rose walked outside, bare feet warm against the wooden deck they'd built together last month. The backyard was small but perfect. Room for a garden, a swing set, and enough space for Mochi to terrorize the squirrels. "They're beautiful, sweetheart," Rose said, admiring the neat rows of tiny plants. "Daddy says they'll grow big and strong if we take good care of them and don't try to make them grow too fast." "Daddy's very wise." Kieran stood up, brushing dirt from his knees, and caught Rose's eye with that smile that still made her stomach flutter. "How's the patient this morning?" Rose's hand moved unconsciously to her still flat stomach. "Sleepy, but no morning sickness today." They'd found out about the pregnancy 3 weeks ago, the same week Rose graduated nursing school. The timing wasn't perfect, it never is. But as they'd learned, perfect timing was less important than perfect love. Luna didn't know yet. They were waiting until after the first trimester, but Rose caught Kieran sometimes looking at Luna playing and getting that expression that meant he was imagining her as a big sister. "When are Sarah and Marcus coming for dinner?" Kieran asked, wrapping his arms around Rose from behind. 5 o'clock. Luna's been planning the menu all week. Hot dogs and ice cream? Hot dogs and ice cream. Sarah's visits had become a monthly tradition. She and her husband Marcus lived 3 hours away, but she'd become something like family. The sister Rose had never had, the friend who understood what it meant to choose love over fear. Last month, she'd brought news that Daniel Reed was facing federal charges for corporate espionage and intimidation. But that felt like news from another lifetime, relevant to people they used to be. "Rose," Luna said, tugging on her pajama pants. "Oh, will you tell me the story about the brave apples again?" "Of course, but let's go inside first. Mochi looks like he's planning to dig up our tomatoes." As they corralled the puppy and settled into the living room, Luna on her favorite corner of the couch, Mochi sprawled across their feet, Kieran reading the Sunday paper while absently playing with Rose's hair. Rose felt that deep sense of contentment that comes from being exactly where you're supposed to be. "And once upon a time," she began, "there were 3 little apples who lived in an orchard." But as she spun the familiar tale of adventure and homecoming, Rose found herself thinking about different stories, about the courage it takes to stay when leaving would be easier, about how families aren't just born but built, choice by choice, day by day, about how love isn't just a feeling but a decision you make every morning when you wake up and choose each other again. Outside, the neighbors were mowing their lawns and walking their dogs. Mrs. Henderson from next door waved through the window, probably heading to her Sunday bridge game. The teenagers across the street were washing a car in their driveway, music drifting from their portable speaker. It was all so wonderfully, perfectly ordinary. "And they lived happily ever after?" Luna asked, even though she knew how the story ended. "They lived happily ever after," Rose confirmed, catching Kieran's eye over Luna's head. But the truth was simpler and more complex than fairy tale endings. They lived. They chose each other. They built something real from nothing more than hope and the radical decision to stop running from love. Thank you for following Rose, Kieran, and Luna's journey. Your participation in this story means everything to us. What did this story teach you about the courage it takes to choose love over fear? Have you ever had to decide between safety and staying to fight for what matters most? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.